Karen's sneer could curdle milk from a mile away. She stood like a human barricade, her floral muumuu flapping in the evening breeze, blocking the ambulance with the audacity of a dictator guarding her throne. The cul-de-sac was a battlefield of suburban pride, where manicured lawns and HOA rules reigned supreme. Karen, the self-appointed queen of Meadowview Estates, had a reputation that preceded her like a bad smell. At 300 pounds, with a perm that defied gravity and a voice that could shatter glass, she was the neighborhood's nightmare. She'd fine you for a crooked mailbox, lecture you for unapproved porch decorations, and once tried to ban a kid's lemonade stand for unsanctioned commerce. Nobody liked Karen, but nobody crossed her until tonight. It started with a 911 call. Mrs. Delaney, the sweet 80-year-old widow at 42, Maple Drive, had collapsed, her heart fluttering like a trapped bird. The ambulance screamed into the neighborhood, lights flashing, siren blaring, only to find Karen's oversized SUV parked diagonally across Mrs. Delaney's driveway. Karen had been waging a petty war with Mrs. Delaney over her non-compliant rose bushes, which Karen claimed were an eyesore because they dropped petals on the sidewalk. The SUV was no accident, it was a statement. EMT Sarah Rodriguez leapt from the ambulance, her pulse racing as she scanned the scene. Her partner, Mike, was already radioing for backup, his voice tight with urgency. Mrs. Delaney didn't have time for this nonsense. "Ma'am, move your vehicle now," Sarah shouted, her words sharp against the humid air. Karen didn't budge. She planted her feet, arms crossed, her chins wobbling as she scoffed. "This is my right. That old hag's been defying HOA regulations for months. I'm teaching her a lesson." Her voice dripped with smug satisfaction, as if she were delivering justice instead of endangering a life. Sarah's fists clenched. She'd seen a lot in her 5 years as an EMT: car accidents, overdoses, heart attacks, but nothing boiled her blood like this. "You're obstructing an emergency vehicle. Move, or you're getting arrested." Karen laughed, a grating cackle that echoed off the cookie-cutter houses. "Arrested? By who? You? You're just a glorified taxi driver." She waved a manicured hand dismissively, her gold bracelets jangling. The audacity was breathtaking. Mike, a burly ex-Marine, stepped forward, his patience thinner than a razor's edge. "Lady, you've got 10 seconds before I move that car myself." His tone was calm, but his eyes burned with a fury that made even Karen flinch just for a second. The neighbors were starting to gather, drawn by the flashing lights and Karen's theatrics. Mr. Thompson, a retired mechanic, stood on his porch, shaking his head. Lisa Nguyen, who'd once been fined by Karen for parking her bike improperly, filmed the scene on her phone, whispering to her husband, "This is going viral." In the distance, Mrs. Delaney's front door hung open, her fate hanging in the balance. Karen, oblivious to the growing crowd, doubled down. "I'm the HOA president. I make the rules here. That ambulance isn't moving until I say so." She jabbed a finger at Sarah, her face red with indignation. "You people have no respect for authority." Sarah's radio crackled. "Deputy en route. ETA 2 minutes," the dispatcher said. 2 minutes was an eternity in a medical emergency, but Sarah had no choice. She turned to Mike. "Get the stretcher. We'll carry her out if we have to." Mike nodded, sprinting toward the ambulance, but Karen wasn't done. She waddled toward Sarah, towering over her with all the menace of a suburban tyrant. "You think you're tough? I'll have your job for this. I know people." Her breath smelled of stale coffee and entitlement. Sarah didn't back down. She was 5 feet 2 inches, but her resolve was ironclad. "You're risking a woman's life over a parking spot. You're not just a nuisance, you're a danger." The crowd murmured, a mix of shock and agreement. Lisa's camera caught every word, the live stream already racking up views. Karen, sensing the shift, turned to the neighbors, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "You all know I'm right. This neighborhood's gone to hell because of people like her." She pointed at Sarah, then at Mrs. Delaney's house. "That woman's been breaking rules since she moved here." "Shut up, Karen," Mr. Thompson yelled, his voice cutting through the night. The crowd gasped, then fell silent. Nobody had ever spoken to Karen like that. For a moment, she looked stunned, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Before she could recover, the deputy's cruiser rolled up, lights flashing. Deputy Harris, a no-nonsense veteran with a crew cut and a permanent scowl, stepped out. He took one look at the scene, Karen blocking the ambulance, Sarah and Mike poised to act, the neighbors watching like hawks, and knew exactly what was happening. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle," Harris said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Karen whirled on him, undeterred. "Do you know who I am? I'm the HOA president. This is my jurisdiction." Harris didn't blink. "And I'm the law. Move, or I'm cuffing you for obstructing an emergency response." Karen's face twisted into a mask of outrage. "You can't arrest me. I'm protecting this neighborhood." She took a step toward Harris, as if her sheer presence could intimidate him. It was a mistake. In one swift motion, Harris grabbed her arm, spun her around, and snapped the cuffs on her wrists. The click of metal was louder than the siren. "You're under arrest," he said, his voice flat but final. The crowd erupted in cheers, Lisa's phone capturing every second. Karen screamed, her voice a mix of rage and disbelief. "This is an outrage. I'll sue you all. You can't do this." But Harris was already guiding her toward the cruiser, her muumuu catching on the door as she struggled. Sarah and Mike didn't wait. They raced to Mrs. Delaney's house, stretcher in tow. Inside, they found her on the living room floor, pale and barely conscious, her breathing shallow. Sarah checked her pulse while Mike set up the oxygen. "Hang on, Mrs. D," Sarah whispered, her voice steady despite the chaos outside. "We've got you." The next 10 minutes were a blur of medical precision. They stabilized Mrs. Delaney, loaded her onto the stretcher, and carried her past Karen's SUV, which a neighbor was already moving out of the way. Karen, now in the back of the cruiser, watched it all, her face a mix of fury and humiliation. As the ambulance sped off toward the hospital, the neighbors lingered, their voices a mix of relief and indignation. Lisa's video was blowing up online, the comments section a firestorm of support for the EMTs and scorn for Karen. By morning, it would hit local news, then national, with headlines like, "HOA tyrant arrested for blocking ambulance." Karen's reign of terror was over. The HOA held an emergency meeting the next day, voting unanimously to remove her as president. Her fines, her rules, her petty vendettas, all crumbled like a house of cards. Mrs. Delaney pulled through, thanks to Sarah and Mike's quick work, and the neighborhood threw a small party in her honor when she returned home. Karen wasn't invited. In the weeks that followed, Karen faced charges for obstructing an emergency vehicle, a misdemeanor that carried a hefty fine and community service. The judge, unimpressed by her tearful defense, sentenced her to 200 hours of cleaning up local parks, a fitting punishment for someone who'd spent years making everyone else's life miserable. The neighbors didn't forget. Every time Karen tried to show her face at a community event, she was met with cold stares and whispers of "ambulance blocker." The lesson wasn't just for Karen. Meadowview Estates changed. The HOA rewrote its rules, prioritizing compassion over control. Neighbors started talking again, helping each other instead of snitching over minor infractions. Mrs. Delaney's rose bushes bloomed brighter than ever, petals scattering freely on the sidewalk, and nobody complained. Karen's downfall was a reminder. Power, when wielded without empathy, is a fragile thing. It takes only one moment, one selfish, reckless act to unravel a kingdom built on arrogance. And in that cul-de-sac, under the flashing lights of an ambulance, justice came swiftly, carried not by rules but by the courage of those who cared. The end. /Z artifact.